Hi Pinewood families, I wanted to give you an update before school started on some of the staff changes that we've had. You were able to see them in our last Pine Needle, but I thought having a picture for the names before school started would be great. I'm going to start in our specials. Joining us from Bursley Elementary is Mrs. Ginger Brown. Mrs. Brown will be teaching art at Pinewood on Monday and Tuesday. Joining us from Rosewood Elementary in Spanish, we have Mrs. Betsy Smith. Mrs. Smith will be teaching Spanish at Pinewood on Wednesdays. In first grade, we have Mrs. Radvansky. Mrs. Radvansky is joining us. She's taking over for Mrs. Vick, who retired at the end of the year. Mrs. Radvansky comes to us from Cedar Springs, but she also did her student teaching a few years ago at Pinewood. So I think she's going to be a great addition, and she'll be a great partner for Mrs. Palmer. In second grade, we have a couple of long-term subs to start the year. We're going to have Mrs. Holly Washburn. Mrs. Washburn had subbed at Pinewood all of last year and had done a wonderful job. She'll be subbing for Mrs. Roper to start off the year. In second grade, we also have Mrs. Yvonne North. Mrs. North also did her student teaching at Pinewood a couple years ago, and she has been back subbing. She'll be taking over for Mrs. Miles to start off the year. In third grade, due to Mrs. Essenberg leaving, we have Mrs. Lemon. Mrs. Lemon has joined us from Sandy Hill, but previous to Sandy Hill, she had been at Pinewood in third grade, so we're very happy to have Mrs. Lemon return to us. In fifth grade this year at Pinewood, we have Miss D'Antonio joining our staff. Miss D'Antonio comes to us from East Lansing, where she went to school at MSU, and we're very happy to have her join our fifth grade team. Also joining our fifth grade team, we have Mrs. Soar. Mrs. Soar comes to us from Bowerwood Elementary, where she did a long-term sub position there last year. She will be subbing for Mr. Brunsink to start the year off. Joining our support staff, we have Mr. Jerry. Mr. Jerry will be moving into our emotionally impaired classroom for our Upper L students. He comes to us from Allegan County, so we're excited to have him join Pinewood. And then also in a support position, we have Mrs. Siegel. Mrs. Siegel is joining us just for the morning. Mrs. Siegel will be teaching intervention groups in the morning here at Pinewood, and then in the afternoon she will be at Sandy Hill. So we've had quite a few different changes you will see to our staff, but we still have many of the favorite teachers that you've always had in the past. If you have any questions, you can always call or email me. I hope that this helps you put a face to a name and you can help welcome them to our Pinewood family.